Hello, welcome to this talk. This is a paper, I guess, I read to the All Asia Creationist Conference in Taiwan in 2023. The title is Creationists' Effective Strategy Against the Four Secular Time Scales. In around the time of 1860, three ghostly spirits arose above Europe and changed the direction of history for the whole world. They are called Higher Criticism, Evolution, and Communism. Higher Criticism attacked the reliability of the Bible. Evolution and Communism replaced the beginning and the end of the biblical worldview. And evolution is considered the scientific foundation of communism. There are four secular timescales. The scientific foundation of evolution is for STS, secular timescales. Number one, the cosmological STS. That is, the age of the universe is about 13.7 billion years. And number two is the geological STS, which says the age of the Earth is about 4.5 billion years. And number three is an archaeological STS. Urban civilization of humanity is about 10,000 years. These three support number one, supports one, which is number four, the biological STS. That life is about 5 million years and humans about 200,000 years. There are four biblical times, and there are extraneous explanations. Those STS are extraneous explanations to short biblical time periods or events. The creation week, which we know is Nisan 1 through 7, 3893 BC. That is 1 week, but it was stretched to 13.7 billion years. That is the age of the universe. And the year of the flood, which we know is 2238, 2238 through 2237 BC. And that 1 year is stretched to 44.5 billion years, so-called the age of the earth. And then the Tower of Babel, which happened in 1898 BC. It was one event, but it stretched to 10,000 years. The biblical history, which is from 3893 BC till now, circa 6,000 years, is stretched to billions of years. Now, this is a chart comparing the four secular time periods and their corresponding biblical periods. The cosmological time, 13.7 billion years, is corresponding to the creation week, which is 1 week stretched to this long. Geological time is 4.5 billion years, and that is the year of the flood, the length of 1 year stretched. The biological time, which is 5 million years, and human existence 200,000 years, it's stretching all biblical time around 6,000 years. And the archaeological time for human urban civilization is 10,000 years, which is a stretch of a one-night event of the Tower of Babel, when languages are confused and people are scattered. Now here is another chart, more intuitive. Here is the time scale from creation to the Tower of Babel. By the Bible, the creation was at 3893 BC, which is the Anno Universi, the year of the universe, 1. Okay, it happened on Sunday, Nisan the 1st, which is Gregorian, April the 1st. And the 1 week ends at 7 days later. Okay, but real time started from the previous Saturday, 6 p.m., the sunset time, because there was night then before there was daytime. and it's in the Jerusalem time, 6 p.m., Gregorian March 31st in that year. That's the beginning of time as we know it. And then, according to the Bible, there are the chronology of the patriarchs before the flood. You get 1656 years. Because it started from year 1, it's 1655 years. Then you end at the beginning of the flood. The flood lasted 1 year, and that's the year Methuselah died. Okay, and the creation week was 7 days, and in the half of the first day is when light was created. In the beginning, the earth was formless and void. It lacked order and it lacked residence. So God used the first 3 days to create order by separating light from darkness, upper water from lower water, and sea from land. And then in the second panel of 3 days, he created residence. He filled the third heaven with angels, second heaven with stars, and first heaven with birds, the sea with fish, the land with animals, and the Garden of Eden with humans. And at the end of 6 days, he have solved the 2 imperfections of the initial earth, and he said, very good. That's why the 7th day was the first Sabbath day. And what the secular STS did is cosmological STS stretches the creation week to 13.7 billion years. Okay, and the year of the flood was 1 year. It was from Iyar, the second month, 17th day, which is Gregorian May 3rd, to exactly 1 year later, if it's not 365 days, if it's not a leap year. And if it is, it will be 29 days more. Okay, but it ends at ER 27th, which is Gregorian May 1st. Okay, and that's the year. And then they stretched to geological STS to 4.5 billion years. And the archaeological STS is stretching the event of the Tower of Babel, which has 1898 BC. And that is also calculated from the biblical patriarchs' genealogy with dates. And the death of Peleg is the year of the Tower of Babel. And Abraham was called 1876 BC, about 22 years later. And that day can be calculated as Friday, Nisan 15th, Gregorian March 23rd. Okay, because it's Nisan 15th and Friday is the same day as the time of Israel's exodus from Egypt. This is Abraham's exodus, or Abram's exodus from Ur. It's on the same day, exactly 430 years before the other exodus. Okay, and that was stretched to 2.5 million years, or 10,000 years for human urban civilization. And the biological STS is based on all of these. Okay, so basically all of these 3 STSs are supporting the biological STS, which is evolution. Okay, it's called its scientific foundation. Now, the effective strategies against the 4 STSs is thus. First one, we need to find the assumptions behind the reasoning for the old Earth theory and point out that these are not facts, but theories based on faith. Number 2, find the hard evidences for the young Earth creationism, YEC, and point out that truth, or true theories, must fit with the facts. Number 3, find the correct biblical chronology with scientific, mainly astronomical, validations. And number 4, explain all observable scientific facts and historical records by the biblical worldview and chronology. And number 5, invite people to make rational evaluations with open minds to decide which theory is more worthy of our trust. So now it's point 1.1, the assumptions behind the cosmological STS, secular timescale. The estimated age of the universe, 13.7 billion years, is based on the estimated distance from the farthest galaxy to our Milky Way. That is 13.7 billion light years. Plus the assumption in special relativity that the speed of light is a constant. There are problems. First of all, one can use the parallax method to measure up to 10,000 light years. For the solar Earth distance, as the astronomical unit is very small, the parallax method is to measure the stars when in 2 seasons of the Earth, when the Earth at the true size of the Sun. So you have a distance, you have a 2 of the astronomical distance, the radius, and then you have a triangle, so you can measure. And then if you can find any difference, then you know the angle, and then you know the distance. However, because the astronomical unit is very small, you can only measure up to 10,000 light years. Number 2, if you use the standard candles that are either Cepheid variables or type 1a supernovae, these can make us measure up to 100 million light years to 1 billion light years. Okay. However, the derivation of the absolute magnitude from the light curve is questionable. Okay. Number 3, the Hubble's law measures beyond 1 billion light years because you can measure the redshift of the spectrum. And then from the redshift, you can derive the velocity that these stars leave us, or galaxies leave us. And then by the Hubble's law, the distance is proportional to the speed. Then if you know the Hubble's constant, you can calculate the distance. By the Hubble's law, the furthest 13 billion light years is a quasar, which has huge redshifts, not a galaxy with small redshifts. So quasars are questionable things which we don't know exactly what it is. But anyway, however, number 3, the validity of Hubble's law and the magnitude of Hubble's constant depend on the measurement of the spectra of faraway galaxies, because nearby ones do not observe the law. So Hubble's law is not based on experimental data, but is an axiom accepted by faith, especially on the magnitude, on the distance of the Magellanic clouds at 162 and 206 thousand light years. So in other words, Hubble's law works for faraway galaxies, not nearby ones. But only nearby ones can measure the distance. So the far away ones, you don't really measure the distance. You have to assume that it works. And then basically you can't measure the constant. Okay, you can't measure the distance. And how do you know that it fits? There is a question. It is more based on faith than facts. Even if we accept the distances from Hubble's law, we still need to accept the assumption from special relativity that the speed of light is a constant. However, special relativity only stands for uniform moving referential system. If there is a relative acceleration, the assumption does not stand. But the universe had a period of high-speed expansion. It's called inflation. It was the consensus of the Big Bang theorists. So if there were a superluminal, faster than light, inflation period, there should be a deceleration period. It was very fast, then it slowed down, until it is stabilized to the stable speed expansion as the present. So during those periods, the speed of light was not a constant. If the speed of light was not a constant, one cannot derive time from distance. The superluminal inflation was in effect a high speed of light expansion. If light decelerated to the current constant speed, it covered a large distance in a short time. So long distance does not necessarily mean long time. So does not. Let me type it in. Conclusion: even if the series of assumptions for measuring distance are accepted, cosmology cannot determinatively derive its popular time scale. Okay, now this point 1.2. A. Assumptions behind the geological STS. The estimate of the age of the Earth, 4.5 billion years, comes from measuring the age of the rocks by the decay of radioactive isotopes. Uranium taking several steps to lead, and K, which is potassium, decaying to argon. Problems. Number one, the extremely long half-lives, like a billion years, have no direct experimental validation. Modern science is only 500 years old. The time of measurement is far less than 1/10 of the half-life, which is the minimum to draw a meaningful curve. I remember in college when I was measuring cesium, in its case, we have to get about a quarter of its half-life to make the dots, make a meaningful curve. So a billion light years, if you want to measure 1/10, you need to measure 100 million years. Well, science only have 500 years. Number two, even if we accept the half-lives, the age of the rock can be derived only if we assume that initially there was only the mother element and no daughter element. Okay. 1.2a. Okay, continuing the assumptions behind the GeoSTS. However, according to the assumption of zero initial daughter elements, different rocks on the Earth appear to have greatly divergent ages. Yeah, for different samples, if you assume they have zero daughter elements at the beginning, then they derive different ages. And according to the nebula hypothesis, point 4a, by the philosopher Immanuel Kant, all celestial objects in the solar system were condensed from one nebula, thus having the same age. According to Bode's law, which saying the radius of the planets, or the radii maybe, of the planets' orbits is, maybe radius, each individual, is proportional to 0.4 plus 0.3 times 2 to the power of n, where n is negative infinity, 1, 2, 3, and so on. For example, r is 0.4, 0.7, 1, 2.8, 5.2, 10, 19.6. And in all of those places, there is one planet, except the slashed one, 5.2. And that is a missing planet between Mars and Jupiter. It apparently broke up and became the asteroid belt, which can become meteors and meteorites. So the age of one meteorite, calculated by assuming that it is from the asteroid belt and has zero initial daughter element, was 4.5 billion years. And that was accepted as the age of the Earth. When using the Earth's rocks to measure ages, if the result is different from the age of that meteorite, the initial daughter element are assumed to be non-zero to adapt to the meta-narrative. However, if the initial daughter element is allowed to be non-zero, all ages are possible, including that meteorite. So if initially the daughter element is non-zero, then you can adjust to any number for any ages. A conclusion: the rocks could have both the mother and the daughter elements in the beginning. The measurement of the age of the Earth by radioisotope dating cannot be definitive. Old or young are both possible. It depends on faith. 1.2b, assumptions behind the GOSTS. One often misunderstood popular term is carbon-14 dating. People think that it could determine the age of the Earth. However, the half-life of carbon-14 is only about 5,000 years. Therefore, it can only measure objects within 20,000 years. Number two, it can only measure organic objects. For the principle of the measurement is that the object breathed when it was alive, so that the initial ratio of carbon-14 over carbon-12 was the same with that in the air at that time. Number three, the assumption that the ratio is a constant is not necessarily true. For carbon-14 in the air comes from nitrogen in the air being hit by the neutrons in the cosmic ray. If there was a water canopy before the Great Flood, which would stop the neutrons from hitting the atmosphere, there would be no carbon-14 in the air before the flood. Reaching saturation from zero needs about 20,000 years. Experimental data proves that the carbon-14 content in the air is still increasing today. It is consistent to zero carbon-14 content before the flood. If the carbon-14 content was zero before the flood, assuming a constant carbon-14 over carbon-12 ratio would bring an error, which increases toward infinity at the time of the flood. So if the biblical flood happened in 2238 to 2237 BC, about 4,300 years before now, the carbon-14 measurement can only get relatively accurate date for the objects within 2,000 years before now. The earlier, the greater the error and approaching infinity. It cannot measure beyond 4,300 years. Thus, it is irrelevant to the age of the Earth. 1.3a. Assumptions behind the archaeological SDS, secular timescale. Paleontology is based on geological strata from the lowest Precambrian layer, that's called Hadean, Archean, and Proterozoic eons, up to the transitional layers, that's the Post-Cambrian or Phanerozoic eon, including the Paleozoic era. That's divided into Cambrian, Oldovian, Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous, and Permian periods, and the Mesozoic era, which is divided into Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods. Then up to the top layer, which is divided into Cenozoic era, including the Tertiary and Quaternary periods. Okay. Now, before 1790, the strata were arranged by the sedative sequences in the biblical period. But after 1840, they were arranged by the evolution of life forms. The problem is, these layers were discovered in different places of the world, then arranged ideologically into one geostrata column. So whenever people use these terms, they're using this ideological construction of geostrata column. And doesn't it really exist? The order of the geological layers are according to the fossils of life forms arranged by evolution. But the dates of the fossils, only the sedative layers, depend on the age of the igneous layers, the only ones that can have radioisotope dating. So even if we accept these huge half-lives, we still need to assume zero initial content for the daughter elements, or to know the initial ratio of the daughter elements to the mother elements in order to measure the age of the rocks. Because the assumption of zero initial content brought greatly divergent ages of the rocks, the non-zero initial daughter elements is practically granted. This would allow any ages. If the initial daughter element in igneous rocks and the age of the fossil in sedative rocks determine each other, it is logical circular reasoning. It may be consistent, but it is no proof. Point 1.3b, assumptions behind the archaeological STS. Continued. Archaeology of human civilization is based on the assumption that human civilizations progress with global synchronism, linearly, and measurable by the means of material production. Time is periodized as number 1, the Stone Age, number 2, the Bronze Age, and number 3, the Iron Age. Detailed divisions are made later as the Paleolithic and the Neolithic ages, the early, middle, and later Bronze Ages, and Iron Ages 1, 2, 3, etc. The problem? Number 1, human civilizations are not globally synchronous, and the material production is not the accurate measure. Point 1a, sub-Saharan Africa never had bronze. Point 1b, Mesoamerica and South America never had iron before the conquistadors. Point 1c, the center of civilization on Eurasia and Africa is the Middle East. The same civilization in different places are not at the same time. For example, China's Iron Age was about 1,000 years later than that of the Middle East. So, same material, not the same time. Archaeology, especially ancient Near East, including the Holy Land archaeology, analyzes geological strata. So like a hill, you dig down, you have different layers. That's called strata. Determining dates by the buried objects, pottery, seal, etc. The relative date, chronological sequence from the strata can be accepted, but the absolute date in what year is not trustable because it is determined by the exported objects from the centers of civilizations. For example, archaeological strata in Palestine were determined by objects from Egypt, for Egypt was considered to have definite chronology. However, Egypt never had a chronological history until Manetho of the 3rd century BC, who first listed Egyptian dynasties by numbers linearly. Manetho listed the Egyptian dynasties by numbers linearly. However, historical research proved that many dynasties were parallel and synchronous. For example, 13th to 18th dynasties were all in the Hyksos time, existing separately in Upper and Lower Egypt. Because 15th to the 16th dynasties were the Asiatics who invaded Egypt after Israel came out of Egypt and Egypt was devastated. So the Asiatics came in, including the Amalekites. They ruled over Egypt in Lower Egypt. But the local Egyptians withdrew to the Upper Egypt. So that's the 13th dynasty and later turning to 17th dynasty. So these two areas have two series of dynasties in parallel, synchronous. Just like China's southern dynasties and northern dynasties period, or the 5 dynasties and the 10 kingdoms period. If they were made linear, it would have lengthened the Chinese history greatly. But China has a linear chronological history, so they're not confused. Herodotus, the Greek father of history, earlier than Manetho by 3 centuries, wrote a history of Egypt with different order than Manetho. For example, the pyramid maker 4th dynasty was later than King Sesostris of the 12th dynasty. The conclusion is Egyptian chronology has systematic errors. It could have been stretched longer by several hundred years, maybe a millennium. Thus, the absolute date of archaeology derived by Egyptian chronology has a similar problem. Okay, could be earlier than what they actually are. Point 1.4. assumptions behind the biological STS. The chronology of biological evolution is based on the first three STS, and there are mutual influences. For example, the circular reasoning in geo-STS with paleontology, which is about life forms. The first three STSs are all based on a series of assumptions. They are not indisputable scientific facts. They cannot serve as the scientific basis for biological evolution, for all of them are different branches of one belief system supporting each other. If a belief system has many assumptions and few experimental proofs, it is like an unstable inverted pyramid. Evolution and related STS are such systems. They should not be preferred by rational people if there are other options. Understanding, mastering, and pointing out the assumptions behind the STSs is the first step to opening the people's mind. Now, point 2a, finding the hard evidences for young Earth. Jonathan Sarfati's Refuting Compromises, published in 2004, listed the following evidences in its page 327 through 342. Number 1, the decay of the Earth's magnetic field. Assuming the current rate, which is 5% a century, assuming the rate is constant, then the age of the Earth cannot be longer than 10,000 years. Otherwise, the high magnetic field on the Earth's core would have brought high heat, enough to melt the Earth. Number 2, there are too many helium, that's alpha particles, released during nuclear reactions. There's too much helium in the rocks, so the rocks cannot be very old, as claimed by the radioactive isotope method. It can be only up to 6,000 years, plus minus 2,000 years. Number 3, by the rate of the increase of salt in the sea, minus the rate of reduction, extrapolated back to the time when the sea was all pure water, the age of the oceans can be as high as 60 million years, which is consistent with 6,000 years, but inconsistent with 4.5 billion years. Number 4, the supernova remnants can be divided into stages 1, 2, and 3. If the universe is as old as 13.7 billion years, there should be many stage 3s, a few stage 2s, and a few stage 1s. However, if it is as young as 7,000 years, there would be many stage 2, few stage 1, and no stage 3, while the observed result is the latter. And number 5, every comet evaporates when it passes near the sun. If the solar system is very old, all comets should have disappeared. But there are still many comets now, so the solar system cannot be very old. The Oort cloud, which is a reservoir of comets beyond the orbit of Pluto, is an unproven assumption. Number 6, because of tidal friction, the Earth's revolution is slowing down. It slowed down 30 hours in 6,000 years, which is about 0.05 seconds per day. The conservation of angular momentum makes the moon back away from the Earth, about 4 centimeters per year. If that rate is constant, the moon would have touched the Earth 1.4 billion years ago. This is consistent to 6,000 years, inconsistent to 4.5 billion years. Number 7, soft tissues have been found in dinosaur bones. This is inconsistent to billions of years and could be consistent to thousands of years. Number 8, the decay from uranium, U-238, to lead, lead-206, needs 14 steps. Among them, 8 steps release alpha particles, which form the radio halos in rocks that are quickly crystallizing. Now, RATE, which is the name of an organization, Radioisotopes and the Age of the Earth, found in the rocks formed during the flood. Point A, short half-life radio halo of polonium, which has 3 isotopes in the length of seconds or days, and therefore there are fast formation of rocks. Point B, the long half-life radio halo of uranium, 4.5 billion years, and thorium, 14.1 billion years. So there are accelerated decay under high heat. And point C, circular and elliptic radio halos. So there were high pressure squeezing of the rocks during formation. Point D, tree fossils in coals. Uranium changed to lead by 64,000 times. That is no long-term decay for billions of years. So uranium, is greater than lead by this many. So there's so many mother and so little daughter elements, there's no long-term decay for billions of years. Then number 9, the rate of the loss of soil on the continent is 6 centimeters per millennium. If there were billions of years, all continents would have become bald. North America only needs 10 million years to get bald. This is consistent to 6,000 years, but inconsistent to billions of years. So these are the 9 hard scientific facts supporting 6,000 years, but not billions, for 4.5 billion years. Now, these are the upper limits on the age of the universe and the Earth. Among them, the smallest would be consistent with all, that is 6,000 years. There is no theory that has no presuppositions. However, Occam's razor requires that the fewer the assumptions, the better. The more experimental validations, the better. And theories must be logically consistent without contradictions, and theories must not have hard wounds. That is inconsistent with experimental hard evidences. This is a pyramid-like system like that, which is stable. The worldview of evolution, no God, old Earth, is an inverted pyramid-like system. The worldview of creation, God is, young Earth, is a pyramid-like system. Finding the hard evidences is the key of making the rational man change their belief system. Now, point 3a, find the correct biblical chronology. The correct biblical chronology is based on the correct knowledge and calculation of astronomy. The first step of finding the correct biblical chronology is to solve the chronology of the divided monarchy. 1. Israel and Judah used each other as references. Israel had 2 contacts with Assyria. The Assyrian eponym Canaan recorded a solar eclipse that can be uniquely determined in 763 BC. Solar eclipse, it goes through a narrow, total solar eclipse going through a narrow stripe, and if you determine a certain place at around a certain time, it can be uniquely determined. And they use different chronicle system, Israel and Judah, and both made changes. So that's Israel. And both made changes. The accession year system, AYS, and non-accession year system, NAYS, and A's and Nays, had ideologies behind them. The kings who feared God, relatively speaking, began using the A's. That's Judah's Rehoboam and Amaziah, and Israel's Jehoash. The kings who did not fear God began using the Nays system, Israel's Jeroboam and Judah's Joram. 4. There were co-regencies or parallel reigns occasionally. Number 5, the result is that the kingdom split happened in 930 BC. The Assyrian captivity of the northern kingdom Israel was in 723 BC, and the Babylonian captivity of the southern kingdom Judah happened in 605, 597, and 586 BC, the 3 captivities. The 3 kings of the period of united monarchy, Saul, David, and Solomon, each ruled for 40 years. So Saul became king in 930 plus 120, which is 1050 BC. Solomon built the first temple in 966 through 959 BC in a span of 7 years. There were 480 years between the Exodus and the temple, according to 1 Kings 6:1. So the Exodus was 966 plus 480, 1446 BC. Israel wandered for 40 years, then conquered Canaan in 7 years. So that's 1046 through 1400 BC. And from Abraham's exodus from Ur, the giving of the promises to Israel's exodus from Egypt, the giving of the law was 430 years, according to Galatians 3:17. Okay, so the promise to the law, from the promise to the law was 430 years. That's from Abraham's exodus to Israel's exodus. From the birth of Isaac, the seed of Abraham, to the Exodus was 400 years, according to Genesis 15:13, because as your seed shall sojourn for 400 years. Therefore, Abraham came out of Ur at the age of 70 in 1446 plus 430, that is 1876 BC. He had Isaac at the age of 100 in 1846 BC, and Israel came into Egypt in 1856 BC, stayed in Egypt for 210 years. This is called short sojourn theory, and was enslaved from the birth of Miriam, which means bitterness, for 87 years. Well, who will name your daughter bitterness unless life suddenly become bitter? So it was the year of conception of Miriam that when that slavery began. And Miriam, according to tradition, was 3 years older than Aaron, which according to the Bible was 3 years older than Moses. So when Moses was 80 years old when he went to Egypt, he did the battle for a year, and when Israel came out of Egypt, he was 81 years old. So you plus 6, you get 87 years of slavery, not 400 years. They didn't even stay there for 400 years. They stayed in for 210 years. Now, by the genealogy of Genesis 11, from the birth of Arphaxad to the calling of Abraham was 360 years. Arphaxad was born 2 years after the beginning of the flood. That is, in the second year of the flood. So the flood ended in 1876 plus 360 plus 1. That is 2237 BC. The year of the flood was 2238 to 2237 BC. By the genealogy in Genesis 5, from the creation to the flood, was 1656 years. So the creation, which is in year 1, now year 0, was in 2238 plus 1656 minus 1, that is 3893 BC. Now, the astronomy proves the biblical chronology. The Bible recorded 3 dates that can be validated or falsified by astronomy. Falsifiability is the minimal requirement for scientific theories, according to Karl Popper, a philosopher of science. So, number 1, it was creation. The first year, the first month, the first day. In other words, Nisan 1st of 3893 BC. It should be Sunday, the first day of the week, because the 7th day was the Sabbath day, Saturday. So the Bible recorded Nisan 1, 3893 BC was Sunday. Okay, and number 2, the first day of manna, which is recorded as the second month, 16th day after the Exodus, was Sunday, and because the 7th day was the Sabbath. So the Bible recorded that Iyar, the second month, 16th of 1446 BC, was Sunday in Exodus 16. And the last day of manna, which is recorded as the first month, 15th day after entering Canaan, was Sunday. For Israel ate the local produce, that is, having the day of first fruits, which is defined by Leviticus 23:11 as the first Sunday after eating the Passover. Okay, so in other words, the Bible recorded that Nisan 15th of 1406 BC, that's the year when Israel entered Canaan, was Sunday. Okay, this is according to Joshua 5, 10 through 12. Okay, the three recorded dates with lunisolar date and the weekday. The astronomical calculation can validate all three records. The probability that they are all true by chance is 1/7 for each, and three of them you have to multiply 3 times, and that is 0.3%. So the probability that they are by design, not by chance, is 1 minus 0.3. That's 99.7%. And there are 2 biblical miracles that seems to have stretched time. Number 1, it was Joshua's double day in Joshua 10 in circa 1400 BC. And number 2, it was Hezekiah's retrograde sundial in 2 Kings 20 in circa 700 BC. Miracles can be noumenal and phenomenal. That's philosophical concepts according to Immanuel Kant. Noumenal is the real thing. Phenomenal is on the surface, like a black box. You get a cover. Outside, you get inside. Outside is phenomenal. Inside is noumenal. So phenomenal, the miracles can be noumenal, that is, God really stretched time for the whole universe. Or they can be phenomenal or phenomenological. In other words, God let the people at the time and the place to experience the phenomenon without changing the nature of time. Both are miracles, equally hard for man, but equally easy for God. Because the 3 biblical records precise to the day were before the 2 miracles, and they were all validated by astronomy. Therefore, the 2 miracles are proven to be phenomenological, not noumenal. Point 4.1, applying biblical worldview on all things. So under the big picture of the expanding universe, the most noticeable works against the cosmological STS are number 1, John Hartnett's book, Starlight, Time, and the New Physics, published in 2010. He used Moshe Carmeli's Cosmological Relativity, published in 2006. It accepts the Hubble's law as an axiom, not as a proven fact, because it works in where it cannot be measured. It can measure in where it doesn't work. So it is racially based on faith. But it seems to work. So Carmeli accepted Hubble's law as an axiom. And when it is applied in a finite Euclidean space, okay, and then John Hartnett derived that, number 1, there's no need to assume dark matter or dark energy. Number 2, the expansion of the universe is due to God stretching the space, according to Isaiah 42:5, after the creation of the stars in the 4th day of the creation week. And the stretching is the superluminal inflation of the Big Bang theory. They are equivalent, and which caused great time dilation. And number 3, the universe's age is consistent to the 6,000 years on the Earth in atomic time. Okay, so according to our time, not their time, our time, because the Earth is near the center of this universe, or rather, the galaxy. The Earth is not the center of our solar system. Solar system is not the center of the galaxy. But the Milky Way galaxy is extremely close to the center of the universe, because we see all galaxies leave us isotropically. Okay, that means taking us as a center and moving in the radii direction. And also, Russell Humphreys, who wrote a paper, Our Galaxy is the Center of the Universe, Quantized Redshifts Show, published in 2002. He used quantized redshifts on Hubble's law and derived that the Milky Way galaxy is near the geographical center of a 3-dimensional Euclidean spherically symmetrical finite universe, with the other galaxies on concentrical spheres with equal distance apart. Thus, the Earth time is the proper time, or like eigentime, eigenstate, for the age of the universe. Even though the above results are intellectually satisfying, there is still great fluidity in cosmology cosmology as a whole. Notice Halton Arp, who wrote Seeing Red in 1998. He found contradictions between the great redshifts of quasars and the small redshifts of the nearby or even physically connected galaxies. He challenged the link between the redshift and the velocity, and even the expanding universe. See Hilton Radcliffe, who wrote The Static Universe in 2010, who still defends the static universe. So those theories are not scientifically totally out. Okay. Now, point 4.2 and 4.4, applying biblical worldview on all things. John Morris, who wrote The Young Earth in 1994, continues to be the theoretical foundation of refuting the geological STS. Okay? And I like his older version. The newer version removed something, and I think it's less persuasive. And Stephen Austin, who wrote Footsteps in the Ash, proved the theory of catastrophe by studying the formation of a half-size Grand Canyon by the eruption of St. Helena volcano. So in a matter of hours, a Grand Canyon, just half size of the Grand Canyon in Arizona, was formed in the state of Washington. Now, RATE, the organization called Radioisotope and the Age of the Earth, which published in 2000, they continued their first rate work. John Sanford, who wrote Genetic Entropy and the Mystery of the Genome in 2005, he discovered the genetic entropy. He's a professor of Cornell. Okay. He discovered genetic entropy, thus created a short-term upper limit on the time of existence of biological entities. This is a significant challenge to the biological STS. Okay, now 4.3a of applying biblical worldview to all. The grand prize of chronology is probably the Egyptian chronology against archaeological STS. Okay. Based on the works of David Rowe, who wrote Pharaohs and Kings in 1995, and The Lord of Avaris in 2007, and Ted Stewart, who wrote Solving the Exodus Mystery, 1999, and Eric Hornan, who wrote Ancient Egyptian Chronology in 2006, and Timothy Mahoney, who wrote Patterns of Evidence in 2015. I found the precise chronology of the 12th dynasty, corresponding to the biblical time between Joseph's entry into Egypt, and including the murder of the king, the buying and selling of grains, and Moses' exodus from Egypt, with water turning into blood and the plagues on the land, etc. We should not anymore use the Egyptian dates to measure the biblical dates, but we should do the reverse, using the biblical dates to determine Egyptian chronology. Okay. Now, using the astronomical calculation by Fred Espinosa, okay, whose website is still at NASA, on the solar eclipse, and Albert and Piavadi Scheffler, who published the program called CalMaster 2000 in the 1990s. And based on the work of David Nivison, The Riddle of the Bamboo Annals, published in 2009, I deciphered today's version of the Bamboo Annals and found the chronology of China's first three dynasties, Xia, Shang, and Zhou, with astronomical validations and a complete agreement to biblical chronology. A correspondence between the 13 characters in Chinese history and mythology, like the three glorious emperors and the five great emperors, and biblical characters can be made. The correspondences are, let's see here, correspondence 1. The accession of Huang Di, the Yellow Emperor, was in the year of the birth of Shem by Noah, 2337 BC. The counting of years by the celestial branches and the earthly stems, which is a sexagenary cycle of 60s, began 60 years earlier, 2397 BC. It was the first Jiazi year. The correspondence number 2, the language confusion at the Tower of Babel, was in 1898 BC, the last year of the biblical Peleg, when Abraham was 48 years old. The first day of the winter month, that is the lunar month containing the winter solstice of that year, was a Jiazi day, when the counting of days with the sexagenary cycles began, and it continues today in China. Correspondence 3, the solar eclipse of Zhongkang in the mid-autumn month of his 5th year happened on Julian September 15th or Gregorian August 30th of the Chinese Xia calendar, the 8th month, the first day, which is in the mid-autumn month, in 1884 BC. In the Middle East, covering Egypt, Palestine, and Iraq, that is today's Fertile Crescent, but not in China. Correspondence of characters. Number 1, the 3 glorious emperors. Number 1, the emperors Heaven, Fu Xi, or Mr. Kindled Fire, was Adam, maybe mixed up with Lucifer. And Nuwa was Eve, Chava. The emperor of the earth was Yan Di, and he's Mr. Magic Farmer, and he's Cain. And the emperor of man was Huang Di, or Hua, or Mr. Big Boat, Xuan Yuanshi. He was Noah. And the 5 great emperors, number 0, that's Shao Hao, or Xia, that's Shem. He was number 0 because he was appointed, but after 3 years of trial, he quit, resigned. And the first, number 1, was Zhuan Xu, which is Japheth. Number 2, Emperor Ku, Di Ku, it was Ham. Number 3, Emperor Zhi, or is a Kush, and Di Zhi. Number 4, it was Yao Fangxun, that's Arphaxad. Number 5 is Shun, that's Shelah. And 3, Xia dynasty, 3 glorious emperors period, and the San Huang, or the 5 glorious emperors, 5 great emperors. Okay, that's Wu Di. And then Xia dynasty, number 0, that's Yu Bo, that's Eber. Now, he didn't really rule, so number 1 was Qi, which means division, that's Peleg. Okay, and means division. Qi also means division. So from then on, it's the agreement of meaning, not sound. And after that is Taikang and not Zhongkang. And during Zhongkang, it was the solar eclipse, but it was in the Middle East, not in China. It covers the city of Ur, which was probably the capital of the world then. And it was that regime that moved east later and became the first dynasty. It was counted as first dynasty of China, Xia. So the 4 STSs are not objective, so that's an invitation for rational evaluation. The 4 STSs are not objective facts, but subjective theories. They are not the scientific foundation for evolution, but of the same nature with evolution. They are theoretical constructs based on faith. They may be consistent to each other, but none is a proof of another. Several bad men saying each other is a saint doesn't prove any of them good. Inverted pyramid-like theoretical systems with many assumptions and few validations are unstable. They violate Occam's razor in the philosophy of science and are likely false. The young earth creationism is also a theoretical construct based on faith. However, it has the least assumption that the God who wrote the Bible exists, and it has the most validations. It fits the hard evidences and can explain many historical records crossing over intellectual subjects and world civilizations. Which one is more rational? Why not make a rational decision? May God our Father, thank you for giving us opportunity to study this. I pray that you bless the hearers, listeners, to understand and to be illumined by not only spiritual truth, but also with intellectual honesty and depth, and which on this subject, which requires sort of encyclopedical knowledge. But we pray that this is the starting point of thinking to seek for the truth, especially for the truth beyond the human ability of experience and reasoning, truth based on faith, and faith based on the Word of God. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.